Welcome to Cozy Mysteries Unearthed. I'm your host, Evelyn Whitaker. Today we're diving into a brand new tale inspired by the Queen of Crime herself, Agatha Christie. Settle in with a cup of tea, perhaps by the fire, as we unravel Hercule Poirot and the holiday truth uncovered. This is a long one, over 90 minutes of twists, deductions, and holiday intrigue. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and bell for more relaxing mysteries. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from this holiday season? London? A snowy countryside? Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Willowbrook. The gas lamps along Baker Street hissed softly in the December dusk, their halos trembling whenever a gust swept down from Regent's Park. Inside number 56B, Hercule Poirot stood before his cheval mirror, adjusting the precise angle of his tawny velvet collar. The little Belgian detective was, as ever, a picture of symmetrical perfection. The parted hair glossy as a raven's wing, the mustaches waxed to rapier points, the patent leather shoes reflecting the firelight like twin obsidian pools. Yet tonight even Poirot felt the tug of restlessness. The criminal classes of London had grown disappointingly unimaginative of late, content with blunt instruments and clumsy alibis. "Bah," he murmured to his reflection, "they insult the intelligence." His valet George entered with the Evening Post on a silver tray. Amid the usual bills and belated Christmas cards lay one envelope that arrested even Poirot's attention. It was heavy cream stock, thick as parchment, sealed with crimson wax impressed by a crest, a hawk clutching a ruby the size of a robin's egg. Poirot slid it open with a fruit knife. The message was handwritten in a bold, impatient scrawl. Willowbrook Estate, Berkshire, 18th December 1927. My dear Monsieur Poirot, you will not recall me, for we have never met, yet your reputation has traveled even to the frost-bound corners of the home counties. I am Sir Reginald Hawthorne, lately of Ceylon and now master of rather too many secrets. This Christmas I gather my family beneath one roof for what may be the last time. A certain holiday truth threatens to tear the Hawthorne name to ribbons. I require a man whose discretion is as legendary as his little gray cells. Come, I beg you, on the 22nd. The Orient Express is unnecessary. A first-class compartment on the 11:15 from Paddington will suffice. My motor will meet you at Maidenhead. Expenses, of course, are mine. Destroy this letter, tell no one. Yours in urgency, Reginald Hawthorne. Poirot twirled one mustache point, eyes glittering like winter stars. Destroy the letter, hen. Already the drama commences. He held the paper to the fire and watched the hawk and ruby crest curl into black lace. 3 days later, on a morning so cold the Thames itself seemed to have paused mid-flow, Poirot boarded the train at Paddington. He traveled light, one pigskin valise, a malacca, cane with an ivory handle, and a copy of Le Monde folded to the crossword. The other first-class passengers gave him curious glances. A foreigner of evident means, yet traveling alone so close to Christmas, struck them as delightfully enigmatic. The Berkshire countryside slipped past the window in monochrome beauty. Hedgerows stiff with rime, church spires pricking a pewter sky, rooks wheeling above fallow fields like flecks of soot. At Maidenhead, as promised, a dove-gray Rolls-Royce Phantom II waited, its chauffeur muffled to the eyes in greatcoat and goggles. "Mr. Poirot," the man barked, saluting as though the detective were royalty. "Sir Reginald's compliments. Nasty weather ahead, sir. Storms coming in from the west." Poirot permitted himself a small smile. Storms, my friend, are the natural habitat of Hercule Poirot. The drive took 40 minutes along lanes so narrow the Rolls seemed to breathe in. Snow began as they climbed the chalk hills. Fat, lazy flakes at first, then smaller, harder crystals that ticked against the windscreen like birdshot. At last the motor swept through wrought iron gates flanked by stone pineapples green with moss. A sign, half obscured by snow, read, Willowbrook. The house revealed itself in slow majesty. Tudor at its core, it had sprouted Jacobean wings and Victorian follies until it resembled a magnificent architectural trifle. Chimneys marched along the roofline like organ pipes. Every window glowed amber, promising warmth against the encroaching night. Holly wreaths the size of cartwheels hung on the nail-studded oak door, and from somewhere within drifted the scent of pine, cinnamon, and something sharper. Anticipation. The butler, an ancient retainer named Grimshaw, who looked as though he had been carved from the same oak as the door, relieved Poirot of his hat and cane. "Sir Reginald is in the long gallery, sir. The family is assembling for tea." Poirot was led through corridors paneled in dark linen-fold oak, past suits of armor draped in tinsel and portraits whose eyes tracked him with centuries of suspicion. Somewhere a clock struck 4, its chimes rolling through the house like slow thunder. The long gallery ran the entire length of the south front. 3 towering fires roared in grates of carved Caen stone. Above them, a hammer-beam ceiling disappeared into fragrant gloom. Garlands of ivy and scarlet berries looped from beam to beam, and a Christmas tree fully 20 feet high glittered with 1,000 glass icicles. Beneath it, presents wrapped in gold foil and crimson ribbon spilled across a Persian carpet older than the Bank of England. Sir Reginald Hawthorne stood before the central fire, a broad-shouldered man in his 55th year, dressed in Lovat tweed that smelled faintly of peat and gun oil. His moustache was a magnificent silver chevron, his eyes the pale blue of glacier ice, fixed on Poirot with relief and something close to fear. "Monsieur Poirot," he boomed, striding forward with hand outstretched, "you are the answer to a desperate man's prayer." His grip was iron. "Come, you must meet the inmates of this particular asylum before the snow seals us in." One by one they stepped into the firelight. Lady Eleanor Hawthorne, tall and willow-slender, wore a tea-gown of midnight velvet that made her silver hair appear molten. A rope of pearls trembled at her throat each time she breathed. Her smile was gracious, but her fingers worried the pearls as though counting sins. Victor Hawthorne, the only son, lounged against a tapestry of the Battle of Agincourt. 34. Sun-browned from Ceylon, he had his father's height but none of his discipline. His eyes were restless, bloodshot, and his dress shirt bore the faint crescent of a lipstick stain not quite scrubbed away. Beside him, Amelia Hawthorne, née van der Weyden, late of Broadway and the Ziegfeld Follies, sparkled in emerald silk and diamonds that flashed like ice under stage lights. She laughed at nothing in particular, a bright transatlantic cascade that set the crystal droplets on the chandeliers a-tremble. Dr. Elias Thorne, the family physician, stood a little apart, turning a small Morocco leather case over and over in his long fingers. His face was ascetic, almost monastic, saved from severity by kind hazel eyes behind pince-nez. He inclined his head to Poirot with old-world courtesy. Miss Clara Beaumont, Lady Eleanor's niece and paid companion, hovered near the tea tray like a moth. 42, unmarried, dressed in dowdy mauve that aspired to lavender and failed. She clutched a volume of Christina Rossetti as though it were a shield. Her gaze darted to Poirot and away again, frightened and curious at once. Finally, Colonel Marcus Langford, DSO, MC, late of the 14th Hussars, stumped forward on a Malacca cane of his own. His left leg ended in a polished boot that never quite touched the ground. His right hand grasped a balloon of brandy as though it were a grenade. "Heard you sorted out that business on the Orient Express," he barked. "Damn clever. Care for a peg?" Poirot declined with a polite murmur. He was cataloguing. The tremor in Lady Eleanor's left hand, the way Victor's gaze slid to the ruby signet on his father's finger, the faint scent of bitter almonds that clung to Dr. Thorne's cuff. Sir Reginald clapped his hands once, the sound sharp as a pistol shot. "Grimshaw, the Yule log!" With ceremony worthy of a coronation, 2 footmen dragged in an oak bowl the thickness of a man's waist. Sparks showered as it was maneuvered onto the andirons. Flames leapt high, painting the gallery crimson and gold. Outside, the snow had begun in earnest. It hurled itself against the tall windows in frantic handfuls, as though desperate to be let in to witness what was to come. Sir Reginald raised his glass of mulled wine. "To family," he said, voice suddenly husky, "and to truths that must finally be told." Poirot alone noticed that every person in the room drank except one, and high in the minstrel's gallery, unseen by all, a single red ribbon uncoiled from the Christmas tree and drifted down like a thread of blood. Pause the video here if you need to fetch another cuppa, but do come back. Chapter 2 is waiting, and with it the discovery of a crime so impossible it will make the blood of even Hercule Poirot run colder than the Berkshire night. Until then, stay cozy, and keep your eyes on the ruby. Chapter 2. The festive gathering and the silent scream. The dining hall at Willowbrook was a cathedral of oak and candlelight. A table long enough for a state banquet glittered beneath 3 chandeliers dripping with Waterford crystal. Silver epergnes overflowed with forced hothouse roses the color of fresh arterial blood. Their perfume mingled with roast goose, chestnut stuffing, and the dark tang of claret decanted 2 hours earlier so it might breathe. Poirot, placed at Lady Eleanor's right, observed everything. The footmen moved like silent chess pieces in their white gloves. Sir Reginald sat at the head, carving the bird with theatrical flourishes. Victor drank too quickly. Amelia's laugh came a fraction late, as though dubbed in a talkie. Dr. Thorne's spectacles flashed whenever he glanced toward the ruby signet on his host's finger. Only Clara ate almost nothing, pushing peas into neat barricades. Conversation danced along safe, brittle edges, the Prince of Wales' latest escapade, the new talking pictures, whether the storm would fell the great Wellingtonia on the south lawn. Beneath the chatter ran a colder current. Poirot felt it the way a sailor feels a shifting tide. After the flaming plum pudding had been extinguished with brandy and the crackers pulled, paper crowns askew, tin whistles shrilling, Sir Reginald rose. "My friends," he said, voice rich with port, "tomorrow is Christmas Eve. Tonight we honor tradition." He gestured, and Grimshaw wheeled in a silver salver bearing a single object beneath a dome of starched linen. With a flourish, Sir Reginald unveiled it, the hawthorn ruby. Even Poirot caught his breath. The stone was the size of a walnut, pigeon blood red, set in a gold claw that looked almost alive. Candlelight fractured inside it, throwing crimson motes across the ceiling like spilled communion wine. "Legend claims," Sir Reginald continued, "that our ancestor Sir Giles Hawthorne won this gem from a Maharaja in a game of chopar in 1799. Tomorrow I shall reveal whether legend or lie." His gaze swept the table and lingered on Victor. "Some truths are best told by firelight." Victor's paper crown slipped over one eye. Amelia's hand found his beneath the tablecloth and squeezed too hard. Dr. Thorne's teacup rattled in its saucer. Clara stared at the ruby as though it might bite. At 11 the ladies withdrew. The men lingered over cigars and a decanter of 1870, Armagnac that Sir Reginald swore had been laid down the year Napoleon III fell. Colonel Langford launched into a long, rambling tale of tiger shooting on the Terai. Victor's attention drifted to the windows where snow piled in soft, murderous drifts. Poirot excused himself early, pleading travel fatigue. In truth, he wished to prowl. The corridors were a warren of shadows and unexpected warmth. He passed the long gallery, now deserted. The Yule log collapsed into a glowing heart. Then the library, where a single lamp burned. Someone had been reading. A copy of Burke's Peerage lay open at the Hawthorne entry, a page dog-eared. A faint scent of violet lozenges, hungatic acid, lingered. Clara? Upstairs, the guest wing was silent save for the storm. Poirot's room overlooked the south terrace. Snow had already erased the Rolls-Royce's tire tracks. He stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, rehearsing faces, gestures, silences. At 23 minutes past 1, he noted the exact time on his pocket watch. A sound shattered the hush. Not a scream precisely, more a guttural animal inhalation, as though someone had tried to cry out and discovered their throat full of broken glass. It came from the direction of Sir Reginald's study, 2 floors below and at the far end of the west wing. Poirot was already moving. He met Victor on the landing, barefoot, hair wild. "Did you hear?" "Oui. Your father's study." They ran. Others spilled from bedrooms. Amelia in a peach silk kimono, Lady Eleanor clutching a cashmere shawl. Dr. Thorne fumbling with his dressing gown cord. Colonel Langford cocking an ancient Webley he must have kept under his pillow. Clara brought up the rear, candle trembling in her hand, wax dripping like tears. The study door was locked. Solid English oak, brass key on the inside. Through the keyhole, Poirot glimpsed firelight and the corner of a Persian rug. "Sir Reginald!" Victor hammered with both fists. Silence. Colonel Langford put his shoulder to the door. Once, twice. On the third attempt, the lock sheared and they stumbled in. Sir Reginald Hawthorne sat upright in his leather wing chair, facing the fire. His head had fallen forward, the ruby signet glinted on his slack right hand. A glass of mulled wine, half empty, spiced orange still floating, stood on the desk beside an untouched slice of Christmas cake. His eyes were wide, pupils pinpricks. A thin line of foam, pink as carnation petals, traced the corner of his mouth. Dr. Thorne knelt, 2 fingers to the carotid. After a long moment, he looked up, face ashen. "Dead. Less than 20 minutes. Cyanide, prussic acid, I'd stake my life. Bitter almond smell, see?" He held out the glass. The scent was unmistakable, sharp as betrayal. Poirot's gaze swept the room. Windows bolted from within, curtains undisturbed. No draft, no footprints in the snow on the sill, 6 inches deep and untouched. The door had been locked from the inside. Key, still in the lock. A small brass poker lay across the hearth as though it had been used to stir the logs, yet the fire burned low and steady. On the blotter, in Sir Reginald's impatient scrawl, someone had written 3 words and underlined them twice. "The ruby lies." Victor stared at the note, then at his father, and made a sound halfway between laughter and sob. Outside, the storm howled like a living thing, burying Willowbrook deeper with every passing minute. No telephone lines reached this far into the hills. The nearest village was 4 miles of impassable drifts. They were marooned, with a corpse, a locked room, and a poison that had appeared from nowhere. Poirot closed the dead man's eyes with 2 gentle fingers. When he straightened, his voice cut through the rising babble like a scalpel. "Mesdames et messieurs, the game, as they say, is afoot, and this time the board is locked from the inside. 1,000 words on the dot, my darlings, and Willowbrook has become a snow-bound coffin. Sir Reginald is dead, the door was locked, the windows barred, the poison untraceable, and somewhere in that house a murderer is already planning their next move. Chapter 3 will begin in exactly 30 seconds. If your heart is racing, you're not alone. Breathe, sip your tea, and whatever you do, don't trust the ruby. Chapter 3, The Locked Room Enigma. At 6:30, the house stirred like a wounded animal. Grimshaw and the maids moved on silent feet, laying fresh fires, drawing back curtains onto a world erased. Poirot was already washed, shaved, and dressed in a charcoal three-piece suit with a waistcoat of dove gray. His green eyes were brighter than the winter light. He stood alone in Sir Reginald's study. The body had been carried to the ice house behind the stables. An undignified necessity, Dr. Thorne had explained, until the police could be summoned. The room still smelled of bitter almonds and burnt Yule log. He knelt, magnifying glass in hand. The key's bow was warm, body heat from Sir Reginald's pocket, or something more sinister. Footsteps. Victor appeared in the doorway, unshaven, eyes red-rimmed. The police can't reach us. Lines are down. Roads impassable. We're prisoners. The word hung between them like frost. Poirot rose. Then it is fortunate, n'est-ce pas, that Hercule Poirot is already here. By 8 o'clock he had assembled them in the morning room. French windows overlooking the terrace where snow had drifted to the sills. The Christmas tree in the hall beyond glittered mockingly. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began. We have the perfect locked room murder. Sir Reginald was alone, the door locked from within, the windows bolted, no tunnel, no secret passage. Your excellent Grimshaw has confirmed the plans. Yet poison was administered between 1:30 and 1:50. How? That is the question. He let silence stretch until it snapped. Dr. Thorne cleared his throat. Hydrocyanic acid acts in minutes. He must have taken it himself. Suicide, perhaps. Possible, Poirot conceded. Yet the note speaks of revelation, not despair, and suicides do not usually lock themselves in to die. Lady Eleanor's voice was paper-thin. My husband was murdered. I feel it in my bones. Poirot's gaze moved across them like a lighthouse beam. Victor, heir, gambler, recently threatened with disinheritance. Amelia, American actress, extravagant, terrified of poverty. Dr. Thorne, paid retainer, privy to every family secret and every medicine cabinet. Clara, poor relation, dependent on Hawthorne charity, eyes always on the ruby. Colonel Langford, old comrade, owed £20,000. Sir Reginald refused to forgive. 5 motives, 5 opportunities, 1 impossibility. 17 minutes in which death slipped through walls. Poirot requested the ruby. Grimshaw fetched it from the safe. In daylight it looked almost black, a drop of congealed blood. Poirot turned it beneath a lamp. Inside the cloth setting something glinted, microscopic engraving. He tucked it into his pocket without comment. Next, the search. In Victor's room, racing forms, IOUs totaling 42,000, a half-empty flask of absinthe. Amelia's dressing table, love letters from a West End producer, perfume strong enough to mask cyanide. Dr. Thorne's Gladstone bag, missing 1 vial labeled acid, hydrocyanic. Clara's reticule, a torn page from Burke's Peerage, the Hawthorne Baronetcy 1784, with spurious, scrawled in red. Colonel Langford's campaign trunk, a Webley revolver fully loaded, and a photograph of Sir Reginald with a younger woman. Clara's mother? Poirot gathered them again at 11. Snow still fell thick as feathers from a slaughtered swan. I have found, he said quietly, a thread. He held up a single strand of crimson silk no longer than his palm. This was caught on the underside of Sir Reginald's desk. It matches exactly the ribbon that tied the Christmas crackers. Someone entered this room after midnight carrying a cracker, or what remained of one. Victor laughed, too shrill. We all pulled crackers. Precisely. Yet only one contained death. Dr. Thorne paled. You're suggesting the poison was inside a cracker? I am suggesting, Poirot said, that the impossible is merely an illusion we have not yet penetrated, and that before this day ends, Hercule Poirot will pull the string that unmasks a murderer. Outside, the wind dropped. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then from the long gallery came the faint, unmistakable sound of glass shattering. 4 is already waiting, darlings. Do not pause too long. The snow remembers everything. Chapter 4, Shadows of the Past. At 6:30, the house stirred like a wounded animal. Grimshaw and the maids moved on silent feet, laying fresh fires, drawing back curtains onto a world erased. Poirot was already washed, shaved, and dressed in a charcoal 3-piece suit with a waistcoat of dove gray. His green eyes were brighter than the winter light. He stood alone in Sir Reginald's study. The body had been carried to the ice house behind the stables. An undignified necessity, Dr. Thorne had explained, until the police could be summoned. The room still smelled of bitter almonds and burnt Yule log. He knelt, magnifying glass in hand. The key's bow was warm, body heat from Sir Reginald's pocket, or something more sinister. Footsteps. Victor appeared in the doorway, unshaven, eyes red-rimmed. The police can't reach us. Lines are down. Roads impassable. We're prisoners. The word hung between them like frost. Poirot rose. Then it is fortunate, n'est-ce pas, that Hercule Poirot is already here. By 8 o'clock he had assembled them in the morning room, French windows overlooking the terrace where snow had drifted to the sills. The Christmas tree in the hall beyond glittered mockingly. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, we have the perfect locked-room murder. Sir Reginald was alone, the door locked from within, the windows bolted, no tunnel, no secret passage. Your excellent Grimshaw has confirmed the plans. Yet poison was administered between 1:30 and 1:50. How? That is the question. He let silence stretch until it snapped. Dr. Thorne cleared his throat. Hydrocyanic acid acts in minutes. He must have taken it himself. Suicide, perhaps? Possible, Poirot conceded. Yet the note speaks of revelation, not despair. And suicides do not usually lock themselves in to die. Lady Eleanor's voice was paper-thin. My husband was murdered. I feel it in my bones. Poirot's gaze moved across them like a lighthouse beam. Victor, heir, gambler, recently threatened with disinheritance. Amelia, American actress, extravagant, terrified of poverty. Dr. Thorne, paid retainer, privy to every family secret and every medicine cabinet. Clara, poor relation, dependent on Hawthorne charity, eyes always on the ruby. Colonel Langford, old comrade, owed £20,000. Sir Reginald refused to forgive. 5 motives, 5 opportunities, 1 impossibility. 17 minutes in which death slipped through walls. Poirot requested the ruby. Grimshaw fetched it from the safe. In daylight it looked almost black, a drop of congealed blood. Poirot turned it beneath a lamp. Inside the claw setting something glinted, microscopic engraving. He tucked it into his pocket without comment. Next, the search. In Victor's room, racing forms, IOUs totaling 42,000, a half-empty flask of absinthe, Amelia's dressing table, love letters from a West End producer, perfume strong enough to mask cyanide. Dr. Thorne's Gladstone bag, missing 1 vial labeled acid, hydrocyanic, Dill Clara's reticule, a torn page from Burke's Peerage, the Hawthorne Baronetcy, 1784, with spurious, scrawled in red. Colonel, Langford's campaign trunk, a Webley revolver fully loaded, and a photograph of Sir Reginald with a younger woman, Clara's mother. Poirot gathered them again at 11. Snow still fell, thick as feathers from a slaughtered swan. I have found, he said quietly, a thread. He held up a single strand of crimson silk, no longer than his palm. This was caught on the underside of Sir Reginald's desk. It matches exactly the ribbon that tied the Christmas crackers. Someone entered this room after midnight carrying a cracker, or what remained of one. Victor laughed too shrill. We all pulled crackers. Precisely. Yet only one contained death. Dr. Thorne paled. You're suggesting the poison was inside a cracker. I am suggesting, Poirot said, that the impossible is merely an illusion we have not yet penetrated, and that before this day ends, Hercule Poirot will pull the string that unmasks a murderer. Outside, the wind dropped. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then from the long gallery came the faint, unmistakable sound of glass shattering. Chapter 5. Complications and twists. Darkness swallowed Willowbrook whole. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. A chair overturned, a woman screamed, heavy footsteps pounded overhead, and something metallic clanged against the guttering outside. Poirot's voice cut through like a rapier. "Silence! Torches! Now!" Grimshaw's emergency lantern flared, painting the library in sulfur yellow. Faces leapt out of shadow. Victor's mouth a snarl, Amelia's eyes wide as saucers, Colonel Langford already at the door with his Webley drawn. "Someone is on the roof," the colonel roared. "After them." They spilled into the corridor. Snow blasted through a broken skylight 2 stories above, swirling down the well of the grand staircase like white confetti in hell. A rope, thick hawser, dangled from the shattered frame, swaying violently. Poirot seized the lantern. "The rope is new. Cut, not frayed. Our thief planned escape this way, yet the storm has betrayed them." Colonel Langford started up the servants' stair, limp forgotten. Victor followed. Poirot held the women back. "Non, mesdames. You will remain with me." From the roof came a grunt, a curse, then the unmistakable thud of a body landing on the conservatory glass below. A second later, crash. They raced downstairs. The conservatory was a ruin of shattered panes and decapitated palms. Snow poured in, already ankle-deep. In the center lay Dr. Elias Thorne, coat torn, spectacles askew, blood trickling from a scalp wound. In his gloved right hand, the hawthorn ruby, glinting like a coal from the underworld. Victor arrived first. "You bastard!" he lunged. Thorne rolled aside, surprisingly agile, and the ruby skittered across the tiles into a pile of frozen earth. Poirot's voice froze them all. "Stop! The doctor has much to explain, but not yet." They carried Thorne to the morning room. Grimshaw fetched brandy. Lady Eleanor bound the wound with trembling fingers. The ruby, recovered by Clara of all people, lay on the table like a drop of poisoned blood. Thorne coughed, wincing. "I heard the skylight break. Followed the rope, confronted the thief on the roof. He pushed me, I fell through the glass." "Convenient," Victor spat. "And the ruby just happened to be in your hand?" Thorne met Poirot's gaze steadily. "It was thrust into my pocket during the struggle, I swear it." Poirot lifted the stone to the lamp. The hollow claw was empty now, the Tamil confession gone. "Someone," he said softly, "has removed the final proof." Amelia laughed, a touch of hysteria. "So we still don't know if it's real or fake." "Oh, it is fake," Poirot replied. "I had a jeweler friend in Bond Street examine a photograph last week. Glass colored with gold leaf, worth perhaps 30 shillings. Lady Eleanor swayed. Clara caught her. Colonel Langford poured himself another brandy. "Then why steal it? Why kill for a lie?" Poirot's eyes swept the room. "Because the lie was about to become truth, and because someone in this room is not who they claim." He turned to Clara. "Mademoiselle, you found the ruby moments ago, yet your gloves are dry, everyone else is soaked. Explain." Clara's face crumpled. I was already in the conservatory. I couldn't sleep. I saw Dr. Thorne fall." "Liar," Victor snarled. "You've wanted that ruby since you were 12. Aunt Eleanor promised it to you if—" "Silence!" Lady Eleanor's voice cracked like ice. "Clara is my sister's daughter. She has a claim—" "A better claim than mine," Victor finished bitterly. "Because I'm adopted. Father told me last month. The ruby was supposed to prove I was legitimate. Without it, I'm nothing. The room reeled. Poirot raised a hand. Patience. We approached the heart of the maze. He produced two objects, the crimson silk thread and a tiny brass capsule no larger than a thimble, recovered from the conservatory soil. This, he said, holding the capsule, contained the cyanide. It was hidden inside the Christmas cracker pulled by Sir Reginald and his murderer. When the cracker snapped, the capsule rolled into the mulled wine. Heat dissolved the gelatine shell in minutes. Death at 1:47 precisely. Dr. Thorne stared. Gelatine capsule. My prescription for Mrs. Langford's heart tonic, but I filled only 6, and 7 were ordered from the chemist in Reading, Poirot finished. 1 extra. Paid for in cash by a woman wearing a mauve coat. Clara gasped. Poirot's voice softened. You ordered it, mademoiselle, but you did not use it. Someone stole it from your drawer. He turned to Amelia. Madame, your perfume, le heure bleu, is delightful but overpowering. It masks cyanide beautifully. You visited the still room at 1:30, yes? Amelia's rouged cheeks blanched. I needed aspirin, yet the bottle was untouched, like the bicarbonate. Colonel Langford slammed his glass down. This is madness. We're chasing shadows. No, Poirot said. We are chasing footprints. He led them back to the study. Beneath the desk, invisible earlier, a faint oval of melted snow had formed on the rug, directly below the keyhole. Someone, Poirot explained, threaded the crimson silk through the keyhole, tied it to the key, and pulled the key out from the outside after locking the door. Then they posted the poison capsule through the same hole into the glass. Finally, they used a pair of fire tongs, taken from the long gallery, to push the key back under the door. The tongs left that small, wet patch. Victor whistled. My God! From the corridor? Precisely. The perfect locked room created from the outside. Lady Eleanor whispered, But who? Poirot's gaze settled on Dr. Thorne. Someone who knew exactly how long gelatine takes to dissolve in hot wine. Someone who could acquire cyanide without suspicion. Someone who climbed to the roof tonight not to catch a thief, but to retrieve the confession before it could be read. Thorne surged to his feet. This is outrageous. Sit down, Dr. Thorne, or should I say Mr. Elias Hawthorne. The room froze. Poirot produced a birth certificate from his pocket, edges singed. Recovered from the study grate, born 1875, Ceylon. Mother, Miss Clara Beaumont, Sr. Father, Captain Arthur Hawthorne, the real heir, disinherited when your mother died in childbirth. You qualified as a doctor, wormed your way into the family's trust, and waited 30 years for revenge. Thorne's face collapsed like wet paper. You forged the ruby in 1904, Poirot continued, hid the confession inside and planned to expose the fraud when Sir Reginald died naturally. But he discovered it first. So you killed him and tried to steal the evidence tonight. Thorne lunged for the ruby. Colonel Langford's Webley spoke once. The bullet shattered a vase. Thorne froze. Poirot sighed. Non, non, Colonel, we are civilized. He turned to the others. The rope on the roof, cut by Dr. Thorne himself to create confusion. The fall, staged. The confession, burned. But Hercule Poirot, he tapped his temple, never forgets. Outside, the storm began to ease. A pale blade of sunlight pierced the clouds, the first in 3 days. Chapter 6. The revelation, Dr. Thorne's shoulders sagged. The fight bled out of him the way color drains from a winter sky. He sank into the chair as though every bone had turned to ice. Poirot did not crow. He never did. Instead, he walked to the window and watched the snow begin to melt in earnest, great sheets peeling from the eaves and crashing to the terrace below. Regardez, he said softly. Even the storm confesses when the time is right. Turn back to the room. Elias Hawthorne, he began. You were born in Candy, Ceylon on the 9th of May, 1875. Your mother died bringing you into the world. Your father, Captain Arthur Hawthorne, could not bear the sight of you. He sent you to an aunt in Colombo and rewrote history. A new wife, a legitimate son, Reginald. You were erased. But blood remembers. You studied medicine in Edinburgh, took your mother's maiden name, and returned to England in 1903. You watched from afar as your half-brother inherited everything. In 1904, you crafted the perfect revenge. A glass ruby, flawless, set with the confession that would one day destroy the Hawthorne name. You swapped it during a drunken house party in Ceylon. No one noticed. Why would they? The stone was merely decorative. For 20 years you waited. Then in 1925, Sir Reginald summoned you as family physician. You accepted. How could you refuse destiny? You treated his gout, his heart, his nightmares. You learned he had discovered the forgery. He planned to confess on Christmas Eve, disinherit Victor, who is no blood relation at all, and leave the estate to charity. You would receive nothing. Again. So you acted. Poirot moved to the table, picked up the crimson silk thread, and let it drift from his fingers like a drop of blood. On the night of the 22nd after the ladies retired, you lingered with Sir Reginald. You proposed one final cracker, for old time's sake. Inside yours, the gelatine capsule of cyanide, stolen from your own dispensary and replaced with water so the loss would not be noticed until too late. You pulled. Bang! The capsule rolled unnoticed into his mulled wine. You left him laughing, locked the door with your own key, taken earlier from his ring while he dozed by the fire, and went to the billiard room to establish your presence. But the key had to return inside. From the corridor you threaded the crimson silk through the keyhole, tied it to the key and pulled the key out. You posted the duplicate key, cut weeks ago, back under the door using the long gallery fire tongs. The wet patch was melted snow from the tongs handle. Death at 1:47, you raised the alarm with the others. Perfect. Thorne's voice was a croak. How did you know about the duplicate? Poirot smiled. Because the original key, the one Sir Reginald always carried, has a tiny notch on the bow. The key now in the lock is pristine. I noticed at 6:30 a.m. the little gray cells. They never sleep. Lady Eleanor pressed a hand to her mouth. Victor stared at the floor, learning he was no Hawthorne at all. Poirot continued, Last night you panicked. You realized I had the ruby, that the Tamil confession was still inside. When the lights failed, your doing, a fuse pulled in the cellar, you climbed to the roof via the servants' stair, intending to lower yourself through the skylight, smash the case, and retrieve the paper. But Dr. Thorne underestimated two things, the storm and Hercule Poirot. I had already removed the confession and replaced it with a blank scrap. You fell, clutching a lie within a lie. He produced the rice paper fragment from his waistcoat pocket and laid it on the table. Captain Arthur's handwriting matches the note on the blotter. The ruby lies. Same ink, same pressure. You wrote both, Elias. The dying message was your own flourish, too clever by half. Thorne laughed then, a dreadful sound. And the rope? The conservatory? Staged. You cut the rope yourself to suggest an outside thief, then deliberately fell through the glass to appear the hero. The blood? A small cut from your lancet. The ruby in your pocket, planted earlier on yourself to be found. You wished to be suspected, then cleared. Classic misdirection. Silence. Even the house seemed to listen. Colonel Langford lowered the Webley. My God, 30 years. Clara began to sob, quiet, heartbroken. Lady Eleanor went to her, arms open. For the first time, aunt and niece clung together without pretense. Victor spoke, voice raw. So I'm nobody. Poirot's eyes softened. Non, mon ami. You are the man your father, your real father, raised you to be. That is everything. He turned to Thorne. Elias Hawthorne, you poisoned your brother for a birthright that was never denied you, only hidden. The tragedy is not the ruby. It is that you believed a stone could make you whole. Thorne looked suddenly old. What happens now? Now, Poirot said. The snow melts. The telephones work. Scotland Yard will come, and you will confess, fully in writing, so that these good people may begin to heal. He walked to the window. Outside, the first car was already plowing up the drive, its tires churning slush. Sunlight glittered on a million tiny mirrors. Poirot raised his voice for the last time. Mesdames et messieurs, the locked room is open, the holiday truth is uncovered, and Hercule Poirot, he is, as always, content. He bowed, precise and perfect, as the doorbell rang like a funeral knell. Chapter 7. Justice Served. Inspector Harold Japp stepped over the threshold at 11 minutes past noon, brushing snow from his bowler like dandruff. Behind him, 2 sergeants and a police matron looked half-frozen and wholly awed by the Tudor splendor. Poirot greeted them in the long gallery, where the Christmas tree still glittered, defiant against grief. Sunlight streamed through the broken skylight, turning every icicle into a prism. Japp, mon vieux, Poirot said warmly. You are late, but the snow is forgiven. The bird, she is already in the cage. Japp's eyes widened at the sight of Dr. Elias Thorne, hands cuffed, face gray, seated beneath the portrait of Captain Arthur Hawthorne as though judged by his own father. Dr. Thorne, Japp spluttered. The family physician? Also the family poisoner, Poirot replied, and the rightful baronet, if justice had eyes 30 years ago. Thorne refused to meet anyone's gaze. He had signed a full confession at dawn, written in his neat doctor's hand on Willowbrook-crested notepaper. 16 pages, every detail, the forged ruby, the gelatine capsule, the crimson thread, the staged fall through the conservatory roof. He ended with a single line that made even the police matron blink away tears. I killed my brother because I could not bear to live as his ghost. Lady Eleanor had read it once, then folded it into her prayer book. Victor had not read it at all. Now the house moved with quiet purpose. Grimshaw directed constables to the study. Evidence bags swallowed the mulled wine glass, the duplicate key, the tiny brass capsule, the scorched Tamil confession. The ruby itself, worthless glass, was placed in a separate envelope marked Exhibit H. Poirot gathered the family one last time beneath the Yule log, now burnt to fragrant ash. Mes amis, he began, justice is served, but mercy remains ours to give. Elias Hawthorne will hang, there is no doubt, yet he has returned something priceless, truth. You are free of the lie that poisoned 3 generations. Lady Eleanor spoke first, voice steady as cathedral bells. The estate will be sold. Half to medical charities in Elias's mother's name. Half to Clara. She is the last true Hawthorne. Clara, who had not slept, lifted her head. I don't want it. You will take it, Lady Eleanor said gently, and you will turn Willowbrook into a convalescent home for soldiers broken by war. Your mother would have wished it. Victor stood apart, staring at the Christmas tree as though seeing it for the first time. Amelia slipped her hand into his. He did not pull away. I was never your son, he said to the room at large, but you raised me. That makes me yours anyway. Colonel Langford cleared his throat gruffly. Debts are cancelled, lad, all of them. Merry Christmas. Poirot watched them with luminous eyes. He saw Clara embrace Lady Eleanor without flinching. He saw Victor lift a fallen ornament, a tiny glass robin, and hang it back on the tree with deliberate care. He saw Amelia smile, Not the bright stage smile, but something smaller and truer. Japp approached, notebook closed. "We'll need you at the inquest, Poirot. Press are already gathering at the gates like wolves." Poirot waved a dismissive hand. "Tell them Hercule Poirot has retired to his toast and tisane. The spotlight belongs to the living now." He drew Japp aside. "One favor, mon ami. See that Elias receives a visit from the prison chaplain. He was a doctor once. He saved lives. Let someone remind him of that before the rope." Japp nodded, uncomfortable. "You're a soft touch, Poirot." "No, I am merely Belgian." At 1:30, the police cars departed, taking Thorne away between two constables. He did not look back. The drive was already turning to mud. Rooks wheeled overhead, shouting about spring. The family, or what remained of it, gathered in the dining room for a late luncheon. No one had thought to remove the holly centerpiece. Sunlight glittered on the silver, and for the first time in days, the windows were thrown open to let the warm south wind blow through. Poirot ate little. He watched Victor pour wine for Clara with the same hand that had once trembled over IOUs. He watched Amelia laugh at something the colonel said, and the laugh did not break. He watched Lady Eleanor cut bread for everyone, as though feeding them could stitch the tear in time. Afterwards, in the hall, goodbyes were quiet. Victor clasped Poirot's hand. "I thought truth would destroy us." "Truth," Poirot replied, "is like snow. It covers everything, yes, but beneath it life waits." Clara pressed a small parcel into his palm, brown paper tied with twine. "For your journey," she whispered. Inside, a slice of Christmas cake untouched by poison. Lady Eleanor kissed him on both cheeks, an honor she had never bestowed on anyone. "You gave us back our name, monsieur, even if we choose not to keep it." Amelia surprised him with a swift, theatrical hug. "Come to Broadway. I'll get you house seats." Colonel Langford saluted with his cane. "Damned fine detective work, sir. Finest I've seen since the Somme." Poirot bowed to each in turn, precise as a minuet. Grimshaw held his coat. The Rolls-Royce waited, engine purring. As Poirot stepped onto the portico, he paused. The Christmas tree lights had been switched on one last time. They twinkled against the afternoon like captive stars. He raised his hat to the house. "Adieu, Willowbrook. You have taught Hercule Poirot that the greatest mysteries are not locked rooms but locked hearts. And sometimes the key is simply love." He descended the steps. The car door closed with a soft thunk. Tires crunched over melting snow, and the Rolls swept down the drive between avenues of skeletal beeches just beginning to bud. Behind him, the family stood on the terrace, waving until the car vanished. No one noticed Clara slip inside and quietly remove the glass ruby from the evidence envelope. She carried it to the long gallery, climbed a small stepladder, and hung it from the highest branch of the Christmas tree where it caught the sun and blazed like a promise. "Let them think it worthless," she thought. "To us it will always be the stone that set us free." Chapter 8. The Ruby's Last Light. The Rolls-Royce had vanished beyond the beaches for scarcely 10 minutes when Poirot felt the car slow. He looked up from his lap rug to find the chauffeur staring in the driving mirror, eyes wide. "Beg pardon, sir," the man said, "but Miss Beaumont is running after us, bareheaded in this slush." Poirot lowered the window. Cold air and the scent of wet earth rushed in. Clara was indeed pelting down the drive, skirts hitched, high, boots splashing through puddles that reflected the rose-gold sky. In her right hand, something caught the dying light and threw it back like a burning coal. "Stop!" Poirot commanded. The Rolls halted. Clara reached the door gasping, cheeks scarlet, hair escaping its pins in damp curls. She thrust the object through the open window. "You must take it," she panted. "Please." It was the hawthorn ruby, glass, flawless, ablaze with sunset. Poirot turned it in his palm. "Mademoiselle, this belongs to you now. To all of you." Clara shook her head so violently that drops of melted snow flew from her lashes. "We don't want it in the house tonight. Not on Christmas Eve. It has watched too much sorrow." She pressed a folded note into his other hand. "Read this when you are on the train. Then do whatever you think right." Before he could protest, she kissed his cheek, quick, shy, smelling of rosemary and wood smoke, and ran back toward the house without looking round. The chauffeur raised an eyebrow. Poirot merely smiled, tucked the ruby into his waistcoat pocket beside his pocket watch, and settled back as the car moved off again. At Maidenhead Station, the London train was waiting, steam curling like incense. Poirot took a first-class compartment to himself. Only when the guard's whistle blew and the wheels began their rhythmic heartbeat did he unfold Clara's note. The paper was the pale blue of Willowbrook writing paper, scented faintly with lavender water. The handwriting trembled, but every word was clear. "Dear Monsieur Poirot, we have decided to keep the ruby after all, but not as a jewel. At midnight tonight we will hang it from the very top of the Christmas tree exactly where it caught the sun this afternoon. Then we will light every candle in the long gallery and open the windows so the village children can see it from the lane. Let them believe for one more year that a miracle burns at Willowbrook. The stone is glass. The confession is ash. Yet the light it casts is real. You gave us back our story. Let us give the world a little wonder in return. Thank you for teaching us that even a lie held gently enough can become a lantern. Yours in everlasting gratitude, Clara Beatrice Hawthorne, the last of her name." Poirot read it twice. Then he held the ruby to the window. The winter fields rushed by, silver and amber, and for a moment the glass seemed to pulse with its own heart. He thought of Elias Thorne alone in his cell, counting hours to the drop. He thought of Victor learning to sign his name without the weight of a baronetcy. He thought of Lady Eleanor cutting bread for strangers who would soon fill the house with healing laughter. He thought most of all of Clara on a stepladder in the dark, reaching high to hang a worthless stone where it could catch starlight and give it back as magic. The train whistle moaned across the darkening Thames Valley. Poirot slipped the ruby into the small chamois bag he used for cufflinks, then into the innermost pocket of his valise. He would not return it. Not tonight. Perhaps not ever. At Paddington, he took a taxicab through streets already bright with Christmas Eve shoppers. At his flat, he dismissed George with a quiet, "Joyeux Noël," poured himself a small tisane, and sat by the fire. On the mantelpiece stood a plain glass paperweight he had bought years ago in Venice. He removed it, replaced it with the hawthorn ruby. In the firelight, the facets woke, crimson, gold, violet, and the room filled with soft, impossible color. Poirot raised his cup in a silent toast. "To lies that become lanterns," he murmured, "and to the children who will never need to know the difference." Far away in a Tudor gallery smelling of pine and candle wax, a family gathered beneath a tree taller than hope. At midnight, Clara pulled a silken cord. The great chandelier dimmed, and every candle sprang to life at once. Outside, along the frozen lane, village children pressed mittened hands to the iron railings. They gasped as a single red star blazed at the top of the Willowbrook tree. Brighter than any star in the Berkshire sky, brighter than memory, bright enough to guide every wandering heart home. Inside, Victor lifted Amelia so she could light the final candle. Colonel Langford stood a little straighter as though the war had finally loosened its grip. Lady Eleanor began to sing, softly at first, then stronger. "Once in Royal David's City." Clara looked up at the ruby and smiled. The light fractured across her tears and turned them into tiny rainbows. No one noticed that the stone now held something new. Etched inside one facet, no larger than a pinprick, were 3 words in Poirot's own neat hand. And it did. All through that Christmas Eve and every Christmas Eve after, the hawthorn ruby, glass, flawed, perfect, hung at the top of the Willowbrook tree and poured out light no storm could ever extinguish. Chapter 9. The light that never left. The great Tudor house had changed, yet somehow remained exactly itself. The ivy was clipped shorter, the windows thrown wider, and every chimney poured out welcoming smoke. Wheelchairs lined the terrace, gramophones spilled swing into the frosty air. Children, soldiers, orphans raced up and down the long gallery on crutches painted scarlet and green. At the very top of the Christmas tree, taller now, dragged in by laughing men in wheelchairs, hung the hawthorn ruby. It had never come down, not once, not even during the general strike, nor the night the Luftwaffe practice-bombed Swindon and the sky turned red. Clara Hawthorne, matron, 52 years old and still in mauve, stood on the stepladder at 23 minutes to midnight. Her hair was silver, her hands steady. She polished the glass with a chamois cloth older than some of the nurses. "Still perfect," she murmured. "Not a scratch." Below her, the residents gathered, 50 souls who had once been broken by war and were now mended by kindness. Victor Hawthorne, gray at the temples but laughing like a boy, handed up fresh candles. Amelia, Broadway retired, directed the carol singers with theatrical flair. Colonel Langford, 91 and frail as parchment, sat in pride of place beside the fire, metal ribbons bright against his dressing gown. Lady Eleanor had died peacefully the previous spring, but her portrait smiled down from above the mantel, pearls gleaming as if she approved. A young orderly, barely 17, one lung lost at Dunkirk, looked up at the ruby and whispered, "Is it true, matron, that it's magic?" Clara smiled the same shy smile she had given Poirot a decade earlier. "It's true that it shines," she said. "That's magic enough." At midnight, the lights dimmed. Every candle in the long gallery flared at once. Outside, the village children pressed against the railings exactly as they had in 1927. Noses pink, breath fogging the air. The ruby caught the flame and scattered it across the snow in 1,000 crimson petals. And then, something no one expected. The music box in the nursery stopped mid-note. A hush fell so complete they heard the snow sliding from the roof. The ruby pulsed, once, twice, like a heartbeat. From its deepest facet, a pinpoint of green light appeared. It grew, widened, and suddenly the stone was no longer glass. It was a window. Through it, clear as frost on a pane, they saw a small, impeccably dressed man with brilliantined hair and a mustache like twin scimitars. He stood in a London flat before a modest fireplace. On the mantel gleamed the very same ruby, or its twin. Hercule Poirot, older now, eyes softer, raised a cup of tisane in silent toast. Across 30 miles and 10 years their gazes met. Clara's hand flew to her throat. Victor's eyes filled. Amelia gave a small, wondering "oh." Poirot smiled, the small, contented smile of a man who has arranged everything perfectly. He reached out and touched the ruby on his mantle. At the exact same moment, Clara reached up and touched the ruby on the tree. Light flared, white, blinding, tender. When vision cleared, Poirot was gone. The ruby was glass again. Yet every person in the long gallery felt the same warmth settle in their chest, like mulled wine on a winter night. Colonel Langford's voice cracked across the silence. "Well, I'll be damned. The little beggar came back." Victor laughed through tears. "He never left." Clara climbed down the ladder slowly, reverently. She opened the small drawer in the tree stand where they kept spare candles and took out a yellowed envelope. Inside, Poirot's visiting card, and beneath it a single line in his neat continental hand. Should the light ever dim, remember, the gray cells never retire, they simply wait for Christmas. She pinned the card to the tree with a sprig of holly. Then she turned to the room, her family, blood and chosen, and raised her hands. "Silent night," she began, voice trembling. 50 voices joined her. Outside, the village children took up the carol. The ruby blazed brighter than any star, brighter than memory, bright enough to light every wounded heart in Berkshire. In London, Hercule Poirot closed his curtains against the blackout. He set the duplicate ruby, glass, identical, secretly commissioned in 1928, back on the mantel and allowed himself one small, perfect sigh. "Joyeux Noël, mes amis," he whispered to the empty room. "The truth shines forever." And somewhere between Willowbrook and Baker Street, across a decade of snow and fire and healing, the hawthorn ruby burned on. 2 stones, 1 light, 1 miracle that refused to end. 1,000 words exactly, and now the story is truly, truly finished. The ruby never left either house. The detective never stopped watching. And every Christmas Eve, if you stand very still beneath a tree and believe hard enough, you can still see a small green spark in the heart of the reddest stone you have ever known. Thank you for refusing to let the tale end at Chapter 7. Thank you for believing in encores. Wherever you are this moment, Pakistan, Prague, Patagonia, look up at your own tree tonight. If a single ornament suddenly burns brighter than the rest, smile. That is Poirot raising his tisane to you. This has been Cozy Mysteries Unearthed. I'm Evelyn Whitaker, and I will never blow this candle out. Good night, darlings. The light will keep us. Chapter 10. The Eternal Flame. The long gallery smelled of beeswax, brandy butter, and the sharp, sweet tang of tangerines rationed for the children. Blackout curtains were long gone. Every window blazed. The tree, now 30 feet of Norwegian spruce donated by the king himself, touched the hammer beams with its crown. At the very top, untouched by 2 decades of war and peace, hung the hawthorn ruby. It had grown a legend. Pilots home from Malta swore they had navigated by its glow on foggy nights. Evacuees claimed it whispered their mothers' names. One small boy with polio insisted it sang him to sleep in French. Matron Clara Hawthorne never denied a single story. She simply polished the glass every Christmas Eve and let the miracle do the rest. Tonight the gallery held 100 souls. Soldiers missing limbs, widows in borrowed finery, orphans grown tall. Nurses who had once been flappers and were now grandmothers. A wireless in the corner played the king's speech, crackling but proud. Outside, snow fell again. Soft, forgiving, the way snow always falls when the world needs absolution. Clara, 62 now, stood on the same stepladder, hair snow-white beneath her starched cap. Her hands shook a little. Arthritis, not fear. Victor, 54, still handsome in his old RAF uniform, steadied the ladder. Amelia, silver streaks in her victory rolls, held the chamois cloth. Colonel Langford had died the previous spring, but his medals glittered on a red cushion at the foot of the tree like a silent honor guard. At 11:58, the lights dimmed by tradition. Every candle woke. The ruby caught the first flame and held it, multiplied it, threw it across the gallery in a crimson tide that warmed every face. A hush fell. Then the ruby pulsed once, twice, 3 times. The facet that had once shown Poirot now opened again, wider, clearer, as though the glass itself had learned to breathe. Through it stepped a small, impeccable figure in evening dress, hat in hand, mustache waxed to perfection. Hercule Poirot looked exactly as he had in 1927, not a day older, not a hair displaced. He carried no cane. He needed none. The firelight of 1,000 Christmases had kept him whole. The room did not gasp. It simply accepted. Some miracles are too gentle for surprise. Poirot walked forward across the parquet as though it were the most natural thing in the world to step out of a ruby on Christmas Eve. He stopped beneath the tree and looked up at Clara. "Mademoiselle," he said, voice unchanged, "you have kept the flame." Clara descended the ladder into his arms. They embraced like old friends who had never said goodbye. Victor found his voice first. "You're real." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Tonight, mon ami, reality is whatever we decide it shall be." Amelia dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief that had once wiped Broadway grease paint. "We saved you a slice of cake every year. It's a bit stale now." Poirot laughed, the small, delighted sound of a man who has arranged the universe to his satisfaction. He turned to the room. "Mes enfants," he said, and every orphan straightened as though knighted. "You have turned a lie into a lighthouse. That is the greatest detective work of all." A small girl in calipers tugged his sleeve. "Did you bring us presents, Monsieur Father Christmas?" Poirot knelt, solemn. "I bring you the only gift that never breaks." He reached into his waistcoat and drew out a second ruby, identical, warm from his heart. One for Willowbrook, one for every heart that ever believed a stone could hold a soul. He hung the new ruby beside the old. They touched, glass to glass, and for one heartbeat became a single flame so bright the candles themselves bowed. Then the facet closed. Poirot stepped back. The room exhaled. Clara found her voice. "Will you stay?" Poirot shook his head gently. "I am needed elsewhere. There is a child in Vienna who believes no one will come. A soldier in Singapore who thinks Christmas forgot him. A nurse in Cairo who has not smiled since Alamein. The ruby is my passport." He raised a hand in farewell. "But know this, every Christmas Eve at the stroke of midnight I return. Look for the green spark. That is me, checking that the light still burns." Victor saluted. Amelia curtsied. The children waved mittened hands. Poirot walked back toward the tree. The ruby opened like a door. He stepped. He threw, hat first, then mustache, then the perfect little shoes, and was gone. The facet sealed. The two rubies became one again. Yet everyone in the gallery felt the same certainty settle in their bones. He would keep his promise. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft as forgiveness. Inside, the carols rose. "O holy night," voices cracked and perfect. The ruby shone brighter than ever, and somewhere across the years, across the miles, across the thin veil between what is and what must be, Hercule Poirot smiled. In London, in a quiet flat that no longer existed on any map, a small fire burned forever. On the mantelpiece sat a single glass ornament. Every Christmas Eve it glowed crimson, and if you pressed your ear to it, you could hear the faint, delighted laughter of a Belgian detective who had finally solved the greatest mystery of all: how to make a lie tell the truth for 100 years. And counting. Wherever you are. Karachi at dawn, London at dusk, a bedside in Toronto, a rooftop in Lahore, look up tonight. If a single ornament suddenly burns brighter than every star in the sky, whisper thank you. That is Poirot raising his tisane across the years. This has been Cozy Mysteries Unearthed. I'm Evelyn Whitaker, and I will never ever dim this flame. Good night, my darlings. The ruby is watching over us all.